The leather-bound diary hit the Montana dust with a soft thud, tumbling from the wagon seat as the horses jerked forward over the rutted trail. And Austin Jamison watched it fall without the woman even noticing she had lost something so precious. It was late September in 1883, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills outside Dillon, Montana. Austin had been riding alongside the supply wagon train for the better part of 2 hours, keeping watch as the small convoy made its way toward the mining camps in the western mountains. He was a ranch hand by trade, 26 years old with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands that knew hard work better than comfort. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Ranger, had carried him through 3 territories and more dust storms than he cared to count. The diary lay there in the dirt road, its brass lock glinting in the sunlight. Austin pulled Ranger to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a practiced ease. He picked up the small book, brushing off the dust with careful fingers. The leather was worn but well maintained, the kind of thing someone kept close and valued deeply. No name marked the outside, just decorative tooling along the edges and that small brass lock keeping its secrets safe. Austin looked up at the departing wagon train. There were 3 wagons in total, carrying supplies and several families heading west. He had seen the woman earlier that morning when they first departed from Dillon. She had been sitting on the second wagon, a vision that had caught his attention despite his usual focus on the job. Dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, a blue calico dress faded from washing, and eyes the color of spring grass that had briefly met his when he rode past. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, traveling with what he assumed were her parents and younger siblings. The wagons were already 100 yards ahead, dust rising from their wheels. Austin considered calling out, riding up to return the diary immediately, but something stopped him. The woman had not noticed its loss yet, and the wagons would be stopping at Willow Creek in another hour for the night. He could return it then, when there was time for proper conversation, rather than shouting over the rumble of wagon wheels and the complaints of tired horses. He tucked the diary carefully into his saddlebag, making sure it sat protected between his bedroll and a spare shirt. Then he swung back up onto Ranger and urged the horse into an easy lope to catch up with the wagon train. His job was to scout ahead and watch for trouble, and he could not let himself get too distracted, even by green eyes and the mystery of a locked diary. The terrain grew rougher as they traveled west, the road climbing gradually into the foothills. Austin rode ahead, checking for washouts or obstacles that might trouble the heavily loaded wagons. Montana Territory was beautiful in early autumn, the grass turning gold and the aspens beginning to show hints of yellow among their leaves. But it was also unforgiving country, where a broken wheel or lame horse could mean the difference between reaching shelter and spending a cold night exposed to the elements. When the sun began its descent toward the mountains, the wagon master called for the convoy to pull off the main trail toward Willow Creek. The small stream ran clear and cold from the high country, providing fresh water and a natural gathering place for travelers. Austin helped the families arrange their wagons in a protective semicircle, then tended to Ranger before seeing to his own needs. The woman was there, helping her mother set up camp. Now that he was closer and paying attention, Austin could see the worry lines around her eyes, the tightness in her shoulders that spoke of more than just travel fatigue. Her father was a thin man with graying hair, coughing into a handkerchief as he tried to gather firewood. 2 younger children, a boy of perhaps 14 and a girl of 11, were unpacking supplies from the wagon with the practiced efficiency of those who had done this many times before. Austin approached slowly, not wanting to startle anyone. The mother noticed him first, a protective wariness crossing her face until she recognized him as one of their hired guards. "Evening, madam," Austin said, removing his hat politely. "I found something on the trail earlier, thought it might belong to someone in your group." The woman turned at his voice, and Austin found himself meeting those green eyes again. Up close, she was even more striking than he had thought, despite the trail dust and obvious exhaustion marking her features. There was intelligence in her gaze and something else, a carefully controlled worry that she was trying to hide. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice clear and educated, not the rough frontier accent he had expected. Austin pulled the diary from his saddlebag, holding it out toward her. "This fell from the wagon seat this afternoon. I saw it happen, figured I would return it when we made camp." Her eyes widened, and she rushed forward, taking the diary from his hands with a gasp of relief that was almost a sob. "Oh, thank you so much. I did not even realize I have been so distracted." Her fingers traced the lock, checking that it was still secured, and Austin saw her shoulders relax slightly. "Glad I could get it back to you safe," Austin said. "Would have been a shame to lose something that looks so important." "It is," she said quietly, clutching the diary to her chest. "More than I can say." Then she seemed to remember her manners and looked up at him with a small, grateful smile. "I am Flora Nichols. This is my mother Mary and my father Thomas, my brother James and my sister Alice." "Austin Jamison, madam. I am riding guard on this supply run, making sure everyone gets where they are going in one piece." Flora's mother stepped forward then, her earlier wariness replaced with genuine gratitude. "Please, Mr. Jamison, will you join us for supper? It is the least we can offer after you have taken such care with Flora's property." Austin hesitated. He usually ate alone, kept to himself on these jobs, but Flora was looking at him with those green eyes, and he found himself nodding before he could think better of it. "That is kind of you, madam. I would be honored." As the sun set and the campfires began to glow in the gathering darkness, Austin found himself sitting on a log near the Nichols family fire, a plate of beans and salt pork in his hands. The food was simple but well prepared, and Austin ate slowly, listening to the conversation around him. Thomas Nichols had been a schoolteacher in Ohio before consumption began to eat at his lungs. The doctors had told him that the dry mountain air out west might help, so the family had sold everything they owned and headed for the mining camps of Montana, where Thomas hoped to find work as a clerk or bookkeeper, something that would not strain his failing health. Flora, it turned out, had been a teacher herself, helping her father run his school. She spoke passionately about education, about the books she had been forced to leave behind, about her hope that even in the rough mining camps, there would be children who needed learning. "Most folks out here do not see much value in book learning," Austin found himself saying. "They are more concerned with striking it rich or just surviving another winter." "Then they are short-sighted," Flora replied with a flash of spirit that made her eyes brighten. "Gold runs out, mine's close, but education lasts. Children who can read and write and cipher have opportunities beyond swinging a pickaxe in the dark." Austin could not help but smile. "I reckon you are right about that. I never got much schooling myself, just enough to read a contract and write my name. Sometimes I wish I had more." Flora looked at him thoughtfully, and Austin felt like she was seeing past his dusty clothes and rough exterior to something deeper. "It is never too late to learn, Mr. Jamison. A good mind can grow at any age." They talked as the fire burned down, about the trail ahead, about the challenges of frontier life, about the beauty and harshness of Montana territory. Austin found himself telling stories he rarely shared, about his years working cattle drives up from Texas, about learning to break horses on a ranch in Wyoming, about the freedom and loneliness of a life lived mostly in the saddle. Flora listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she understood the rhythms of Western life, even if she had not lived them herself. Her family had been traveling for 3 months now, slowly making their way west with other migrant groups, and she had learned much from observation and necessity. When the conversation finally wound down and the night grew late, Austin stood to take his leave. "Thank you for the meal and the company, Mrs. Nichols. It was a pleasure meeting you all." "The pleasure was ours, Mr. Jamison," Mary Nichols replied warmly. "And thank you again for returning Flora's diary. It contains things that cannot be replaced." Austin caught Flora's eye as he turned to go, and she gave him a small, private smile that made his heart beat a little faster. "Perhaps we will see you on the trail tomorrow, Mr. Jamison. Count on it, Miss Nichols. I will be riding guard until we reach the camps." That night, lying in his bedroll under the vast Montana sky, Austin found himself thinking about Flora Nichols and her locked diary. What secrets did it hold? What thoughts and dreams had she committed to those hidden pages? And why did the thought of her green eyes and intelligent conversation make him feel something he had not felt in years? A longing for connection beyond the temporary partnerships of ranch work and cattle drives. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with frost sparkling on the grass until the sun burned it away. The wagon train prepared to move out, and Austin saddled Ranger in the pre-dawn light, his breath misting in the cold air. He had slept poorly, his mind too full of a certain auburn-haired woman to find proper rest. As the wagons rolled out, Austin took his position riding ahead, checking the trail and watching for any signs of trouble. It was dangerous country they were entering now, not just from the terrain but from desperate men who sometimes preyed on supply wagons heading to the mining camps. The gold and silver strikes in Montana had brought prosperity to some and lawlessness to others, and Austin knew better than to let his guard down. Around mid-morning, he spotted tracks crossing the main trail, several horses moving fast from the north. Austin studied them carefully, noting the unshod hooves that suggested Indian ponies, though it was also possible they were just wild horses or animals belonging to one of the scattered ranches in the area. Still, caution was warranted. The Crow and Blackfeet tribes had signed treaties, but tensions remained high as more settlers pushed into their traditional lands. Austin rode back to warn the wagon master, a grizzled veteran of the frontier named Pete Halloran. Pete studied the tracks with experienced eyes and nodded grimly. "Could be nothing, could be trouble. We will keep moving but stay alert. Pass the word to keep the children close and the rifles handy." Austin rode down the line of wagons, stopping briefly at each to deliver Pete's warning. When he reached the Nichols wagon, Flora was driving while her father rested in the back, his coughing more pronounced in the morning air. She handled the reins with competent hands, keeping the horses steady on the rough trail. "Miss Nichols," Austin said, riding alongside. "We spotted some tracks ahead. Likely nothing to worry about, but Pete wants everyone staying alert just in case." Flora's face tightened with worry, but she nodded calmly. "Thank you for the warning, Mr. Jamison. We will be careful. Your father doing all right?" Austin asked, noting the sound of coughing from the wagon bed. "Some days are better than others," Flora said quietly. "The travel is hard on him, but he insists we push on. He wants to reach the camps before the heavy snows come." "We should make it with time to spare if the weather holds," Austin assured her. "And once you are settled, The mountain air might help like the doctors said. Flora looked at him with gratitude warming her green eyes. You are kind to care, Mr. Jamison. Most men we have met on this journey have been friendly enough but distant. You actually seem to see us as people, not just another wagon to guard. Austin felt his face warm at her words. Everyone has their story, Miss Nichols. Seems only right to pay attention to it. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon creaking and groaning over the uneven ground. Austin found himself reluctant to ride away, enjoying the simple pleasure of Flora's presence beside him. But duty called, and eventually he touched his hat brim in farewell and rode ahead to continue his scouting. The tracks he had spotted earlier turned out to be nothing more than wild horses after all, and the day passed without incident. But that evening, as they made camp near a stand of cottonwood trees, Austin noticed Flora sitting apart from her family, the diary open in her lap and a pencil in her hand. The lock hung open on its brass hinge, and she was writing with fierce concentration, her face illuminated by the fading sunlight. Austin did not approach, sensing she needed privacy for whatever thoughts she was committing to paper. But he found himself watching from across the camp, curious and drawn to this woman who carried such secrets close to her heart. Later, after supper, Flora's younger brother James approached Austin as he was checking Ranger's hooves for stones. The boy was tall for 14, with his sister's green eyes and an eager, curious expression. Mr. Jamison, sir, could I ask you something? Sure, son. What is on your mind? My sister Flora, she has been sad for a long time now, since before we left Ohio. But tonight, after you returned her diary, I heard her singing while she cooked supper. I have not heard her sing in over a year. James looked at Austin with an intensity beyond his years. I do not know what is in that diary, but it matters to her more than anything. Thank you for bringing it back. Austin felt a weight settle in his chest, a sense that there were depths to Flora's story he had not yet glimpsed. I just did what any decent man would do, James, but I am glad if it helped your sister. James nodded seriously. She is the strongest person I know, Mr. Jamison. When Pa got sick and could not teach anymore, Flora ran the school by herself for almost a year. When the town council said they would not pay a woman teacher's wages, she kept teaching anyway, taking payment in eggs and vegetables and whatever folks could spare. She sold her good dresses to pay for Ma's medicine, sold her books to buy our passage west. But through it all, she kept that diary, wrote in it every night, no matter how tired she was. Sounds like your sister is remarkable, Austin said quietly. She is, James agreed, but she is also lonely. None of the men back home were good enough for her. At least that is what Pa said. They were intimidated by how smart she is, how much she knows. Pa said Flora needed a man who could appreciate a strong mind as much as a pretty face. The boy hesitated, then added with the blunt honesty of youth, I think you might be that kind of man, Mr. Jamison. Austin looked at James with surprise, not sure how to respond to such a direct observation. That is a mighty big assumption, son. Maybe, James said with a shrug. But I see how you look at her, and I see how she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching. My sister never looks at anyone like that. Before Austin could formulate a response, James wandered back to his family's fire, leaving Austin standing with Ranger in the gathering darkness, his mind spinning with new information and possibilities he had not let himself fully consider. That night, sleep eluded Austin even more thoroughly than the night before. He lay staring at the stars, thinking about Flora Nichols and her locked diary, about a woman strong enough to sacrifice everything for her family, about green eyes that saw past the surface of things to something deeper. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Austin Road Guard checked the trail, warned of potential dangers, and found excuses to ride alongside the Nichols wagon whenever possible. Flora seemed to welcome his presence, and their conversations grew longer and more personal. She told him about her favorite books, about her dreams of opening a real school someday with proper supplies and trained teachers. He told her about the beauty of a Montana sunrise seen from horseback, about the satisfaction of honest work well done, about his own half-formed dreams of someday having land of his own, and a reason to stay in one place. They were careful conversations, dancing around deeper feelings that neither was quite ready to name, but the connection between them grew stronger with each passing day. On the fourth evening, as they camped in a sheltered valley with good grass and water, Austin finally worked up the courage to seek out Flora directly. He found her gathering firewood near the creek, her arms already full of dead branches. "Let me help you with that," he offered, taking some of the wood from her arms. "Thank you," Flora said, smiling up at him. "I think I was being overly ambitious." They walked back toward the camp together, and Austin found himself speaking before he could overthink it. "Miss Nichols, I hope you do not think me forward, but I have enjoyed our conversations these past few days more than I can rightly express." Flora stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious but hopeful. "I have enjoyed them too, Mr. Jamison, very much." "I was wondering," Austin continued, his heart pounding, "once we reach the mining camps and your family is settled, if you might allow me to call on you proper-like. I know I am just a ranch hand with no prospects beyond my next job, but I would like the chance to know you better, if you are willing." Flora's face transformed with a brilliant smile that made Austin's breath catch. "I would like that very much, Mr. Jamison, more than you know." They stood there in the fading light, arms full of firewood, grinning at each other like fools, and Austin felt something in his chest unlock, something he had kept carefully guarded for years. "Austin," he said, "if we are going to be courting, you should call me Austin." "Only if you call me Flora," she replied, her eyes sparkling with happiness and something that might have been mischief. "Though I suppose we should be proper in front of my parents." "Your father is not going to shoot me for asking to court his daughter, is he?" Austin asked, only half joking. Flora laughed, a sound like bells that Austin wanted to hear every day for the rest of his life. "No, Papa will be pleased. He worries about me, about what will happen to me if, when she paused, the joy dimming slightly. "He wants to see me settled and happy before his illness takes him." Which is morbid to discuss, but it is the reality we live with. Austin set down his armful of wood and gently took the branches from Flora's arms as well, placing them aside. Then he took both her hands in his, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work, the strength in her fingers. "Flora, I cannot promise I am the man your father hopes for. I do not have land or money or education. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to make you happy, to support your dreams, to be the partner you deserve." Flora squeezed his hands, tears shimmering in her green eyes. "Austin, do you know what most men want from a woman? Quiet obedience, simple domesticity, someone to cook and clean and never challenge them. But you ask about my thoughts, you listen when I speak, you treat me like an equal. That is worth more than all the land and money in Montana." They stood there in the deepening twilight, hands clasped, and Austin felt the world shift around him. He had spent years drifting from job to job, never quite finding a place to belong. But looking into Flora's eyes, he felt like he had finally found his home. The moment was broken by young Alice calling for Flora, needing help with some task back at the wagon. Flora reluctantly pulled her hands free, but she gave Austin one more smile before she left, a smile full of promise and possibility. Austin gathered up the firewood and brought it to the Nichols family fire, where Thomas Nichols was sitting wrapped in a blanket despite the mildness of the evening. The older man looked at Austin with knowing eyes. "Mr. Jamison, might I have a word with you?" Austin's stomach tightened, but he nodded and sat down across the fire from Flora's father. "Yes, sir." Thomas coughed into his handkerchief, a wet, rattling sound before speaking. "I am dying, Mr. Jamison. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe a year if I am lucky. My greatest fear is not death itself, but leaving my family unprotected in this harsh country." "Sir," Thomas held up a hand. "Let me finish. I have seen how you look at my daughter. More importantly, I have seen how she looks at you. Flora is a remarkable woman, Mr. Jamison. She is brilliant, strong, capable of anything she sets her mind to. But she has also carried our family on her shoulders for too long. She deserves happiness, deserves a partner who can appreciate her for who she is." "I believe I could be that man, sir," Austin said quietly. "With your blessing, I would like the chance to prove it." Thomas studied him for a long moment, and Austin felt like he was being measured against some invisible standard. Finally, the older man nodded. "You have my blessing, Mr. Jamison. But understand this. If you hurt my daughter, if you fail to cherish her as she deserves, I will find a way to haunt you from beyond the grave." Despite the serious moment, Austin could not help but smile. "Understood, sir. I will do right by her, you have my word." They shook hands, and Austin felt the tremor in Thomas Nichols's grip, the weakness that came from months of wasting illness. It made Austin's determination even stronger. Flora would not face the loss of her father alone, not if he had anything to say about it. The remaining days to the mining camps passed in a blur of heightened awareness and growing affection. Austin and Flora stole moments together whenever possible, talking late into the evening by the fire, walking along the creek during rest stops, sharing hopes and fears and dreams. The locked diary made occasional appearances, and though Austin never asked what Flora wrote in it, he noticed that she seemed lighter somehow, as if the act of writing helped her process the emotions of their developing relationship. On their last night before reaching the camps, Flora showed Austin the diary for the first time, holding it out to him as they sat together away from the others. "I want you to understand what this means to me," she said softly. "This diary was a gift from my grandmother, given to me on my 16th birthday. She told me to use it to record the story of my life, the truth of my experiences, not the polite version society expects, but the real, raw, honest version." Austin took the diary carefully, feeling the weight of trust in the gesture. "You do not have to share this with me if you are not ready." "I want to," Flora insisted. "I have been writing in it for 7 years now. It contains my thoughts on teaching, on my father's illness, on leaving everything I knew behind. It contains my fears and frustrations, my anger at a world that values women so little, my grief at watching my father fade away day by day." She paused, then added quietly, "And recently it contains my thoughts about you." Austin's heart beat faster. "About me," Flora nodded, a blush coloring her cheeks even in the firelight. "From the moment you returned my diary, I have been writing about you. About how kind you were, how you treated me with respect and genuine interest. About how you make me feel seen and valued in a way I have never experienced before. About how I might be falling in love with you, even though we have known each other less than 2 weeks." Austin set the diary aside gently and cupped Flora's face in his hands, looking into her eyes with all the intensity of his feelings. "Flora, I know it is fast. I know people will say we are being reckless, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You make me want to be better, to build something lasting, to finally put down roots after years of drifting. Then build them with me, Flora whispered. "Help me create a life here, a home. My family will need support once we settle, and I will need a partner I can count on." "Could you be that partner, Austin? Not just a suitor, but a true equal, someone who believes in my dreams as much as his own?" "Yes," Austin said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it. Flora, I want to court you properly, do this right, but I also want you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not looking for a passing romance. I am looking for a wife, a partner, someone to share my life with. And I believe that someone is you." Flora's answering kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Flora rested her forehead against Austin's. "When you found my diary on that dusty trail," she said, "you could have ignored it, left it there to be ruined or lost forever. But you kept it safe. You protected something precious to me before you even knew me. That told me everything I needed to know about your character, Austin Jamison." "I will always keep you safe," Austin promised. "Your heart, your dreams, your precious secrets, all of it matters to me because you matter to me." They sat together until the fire burned low, making plans and promises. Two people who had been alone finding solace and joy in unexpected connection. The mining camp of Silver Ridge sprawled across a mountainside like a wound in the earth. All rough wooden buildings and muddy streets, and the constant thunder of stamp mills crushing ore. It was ugly and chaotic and full of desperate, determined people chasing fortune or fleeing failure. But to Austin and Flora, arriving with the supply wagons on a bright October morning, it represented possibility. Pete Halloran helped the Nichols family find temporary lodging in a boarding house on the edge of town. A rough but clean establishment run by a widow named Martha Henderson. The accommodations were cramped, all 5 Nichols family members sharing 2 small rooms, but it was shelter and safety while they figured out their next steps. Austin stayed in Silver Ridge rather than returning to Dillon with the supply wagons, a decision that surprised no one who had been paying attention during the journey. He found work as a guard at one of the larger mining operations, a job that paid well and allowed him to stay close to Flora and her family. True to his word, Austin courted Flora properly. He called on her at the boarding house every Sunday afternoon, sitting in the small parlor under Mrs. Henderson's watchful eye, talking with Flora and her family about everything and nothing. He brought small gifts when he could afford them. A hair ribbon from the general store, a book of poetry that the store owner was using to prop up a wobbly shelf, wildflowers picked from the high meadows above the mines. Flora blossomed under Austin's attention and the relative stability of their new situation. She found work almost immediately as a tutor for the children of the mine superintendent, a man who valued education and was willing to pay a woman fair wages for her skills. The work was not as fulfilling as running her own school, but it was a start. Thomas Nichols found a position as a bookkeeper at one of the mining company offices, work that was not too strenuous for his failing health. Mary took in sewing to supplement the family income, and even young James found work running errands and messages between the various mining operations. The months passed in a rhythm of work and courtship, of building a life in the rough mining town. Austin saved his wages religiously, planning for a future that seemed brighter every day. Flora continued writing in her diary, and sometimes she would read Austin passages that she wanted to share, glimpses into her heart that made him love her more with each word. It was November when Thomas Nichols took a turn for the worse. The mountain air had helped initially, but the brutal Montana winter was beginning, and the cold seemed to settle in his lungs and refuse to leave. He grew weaker, coughing more, struggling for breath even when sitting still. Austin was there as much as he could be, helping Mary care for Thomas, entertaining the younger children to give Flora time to sit with her father, making himself useful in whatever way he could. He had grown to love the entire Nichols family, not just Flora, and watching Thomas fade was painful for everyone. On a snowy evening in early December, Thomas called Austin to his bedside. Flora and her mother were in the kitchen preparing supper, and Thomas wanted privacy for what he had to say. "Austin," Thomas whispered, his voice weak but determined, "I need you to make me a promise." "Anything, sir. Marry my daughter. Not because I am dying and want to see it, though I confess that would bring me peace. But because she loves you and you love her, and because together you can build the life she deserves." Thomas coughed, struggled for breath, then continued. "I have some money saved, enough for a small piece of land outside town if you are willing to work it. Take it. Build a home. Give Flora the stability and partnership she needs. Sir, I cannot take your savings. Your family needs that money." Thomas managed a weak smile. "My family needs you, Austin. Mary will be cared for by her sister in California once I am gone. James will apprentice with the blacksmith here in town. Alice will go with her mother. But Flora, my stubborn, brilliant Flora, she will insist on staying here if she thinks you cannot provide for her. Take the money, build the home, marry my daughter and make her happy." Austin felt tears burning in his eyes. "I promise, sir. I will take care of her, all of them, for as long as I draw breath." Thomas nodded, satisfied, and closed his eyes. "Good, that is good. Now send Flora in. I need to speak with her." Austin found Flora in the kitchen and delivered her father's message. She looked at him with worried eyes, clearly sensing that something significant was happening, but she went to her father without question. That night, Austin approached Mary Nichols and formally asked for Flora's hand in marriage. Mary wept and hugged him, her answer a tearful yes. They agreed to keep the engagement quiet for a few days, to tell Thomas and Flora together when the moment was right. But Thomas Nichols did not have a few days. He died peacefully in his sleep that very night, Flora's hand in his last words a whispered blessing on his daughter and the man he had chosen to trust with her future. The grief hit the family like a physical blow. Flora, who had been so strong for so long, finally broke, sobbing in Austin's arms as the reality of her loss overwhelmed her. Austin held her through the storm of tears, offering what comfort he could, wishing desperately that he could take away her pain. They buried Thomas Nichols in the small cemetery on the hillside above Silver Ridge, a simple funeral attended by the family and the few friends they had made in their short time in Montana. The mine superintendent sent flowers. Martha Henderson provided food for the mourners. And Austin stood beside Flora, his arm around her shoulders, supporting her through the darkest day of her life. In the days following the funeral, practical matters demanded attention. Mary Nichols made arrangements to travel to California to stay with her sister, taking Alice with her. James, nearly 15 now and mature beyond his years, confirmed his apprenticeship with the blacksmith and moved into a small room above the forge. Flora was faced with a choice: go to California with her mother and sister, stay in Silver Ridge alone, or accept the proposal that Austin had been planning to make before her father's death. It was not the romantic proposal either of them had imagined, offered in a boarding house parlor with Mary as a witness. Austin's voice rough with emotion as he told Flora about her father's last wishes and his own sincere desire to marry her. "I know the timing is not ideal," Austin said, holding both of Flora's hands in his. "I know you are grieving and that this is happening faster than we planned. But Flora, your father was right. I love you. I want to build a life with you, not someday in the distant future, but now. Let me honor your father's wishes. Let me take care of you, not because you need taking care of, but because we are stronger together than apart." Flora looked at him with red-rimmed eyes, grief and love and exhaustion all mixed together in her expression. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Austin. I want that too. I want a home with you, a partnership, a life built on honesty and respect and love. I want all of it." They were married in January of 1884, a simple ceremony in the boarding house parlor with Mary, James, Alice, and a few friends as witnesses. The traveling preacher who performed the ceremony was slightly drunk and mispronounced Austin's last name, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the moment when Austin slipped a simple gold band onto Flora's finger and promised to love her for the rest of his days. What mattered was the kiss they shared as husband and wife, full of promise and hope, despite the grief that still shadowed them. With Thomas's savings and Austin's carefully hoarded wages, they purchased a small piece of land 5 miles outside Silver Ridge, 20 acres with a creek running through it, and a view of the mountains that took their breath away. There was no house yet, just scrubland and potential, but Austin and Flora looked at that empty land and saw their future. They lived in a tent on their property that first winter while Austin worked on building a cabin. Flora continued tutoring to bring in income, making the long walk to town and back several times a week. James helped with the construction on his days off, and slowly, painfully slowly, a home took shape. It was small, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was solid and weathertight and theirs. They moved into the unfinished cabin in March, sleeping on a mattress stuffed with straw, cooking over a fireplace that Austin had built stone by stone. It was hard, exhausting work, but they were happy. At night, by the light of a single oil lamp, Flora would write in her diary while Austin carved wooden spoons or mended tack, and the simple domesticity of those moments felt more precious than gold. Mary and Alice left for California in April, a tearful goodbye at the stage-coach office in town. Flora clung to her mother and sister, knowing it might be months or even years before they saw each other again. Austin held her as the stage-coach rolled away, and that night, Flora cried herself to sleep in their small cabin. But life continued, as it always does. Spring brought warmer weather and the challenge of planting their first garden. Austin had grown up on ranches, not farms, but Flora had helped her mother with kitchen gardens all her life, and together they figured it out. They planted potatoes and carrots, beans and squash, hoping that by harvest time they would have food to see them through the next winter. Austin took on extra work breaking horses for the mining company, dangerous work that paid well. Flora expanded her tutoring to include adult students who wanted to learn to read and write, miners who sent money home to families and wanted to write their own letters rather than relying on scribes. Their income was modest but steady, and every month they managed to save a little more. On a warm evening in May, as they sat together on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose, Flora handed Austin her diary. "I want you to read something," she said quietly. Austin took the diary carefully, still honored every time Flora trusted him with her private thoughts. He opened to the marked page and read the entry dated the previous day. In it, Flora had written about the garden, about the tiny green shoots pushing up through the soil despite the harsh conditions. She had written about grief, about how losing her father still hurt but the pain was becoming bearable, integrated into who she was rather than overwhelming her. And she had written about Austin, about how his steady presence and unwavering support had given her the strength to not just survive but thrive. But it was the final paragraph that made Austin's hands tremble as he read. "I think I might be with child. I have not told Austin yet because I want to be certain, but I feel different, changed in subtle ways that I recognize from watching other women. I am scared because childbirth is dangerous and we are so far from doctors and help. But I am also joyful because this child will be made of love and hope, born into a home built by two people who chose each other despite all the obstacles. If I am right, if there truly is a baby growing inside me, then I want to record this moment. The moment before everything changes, before I tell my husband that he is going to be a father. I love you, Austin Jamison. You found my diary on a dusty trail and kept it safe until I came back for it. And in doing so, you found your way into my heart. Now we will create a new story together, a story that begins with just the two of us but will grow to include this precious new life. I cannot wait to see what we build together. Austin looked up from the diary to find Flora watching him with nervous hope in her green eyes. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Are you?" Flora nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think so. I am almost certain." "Austin, we are going to have a baby." Austin let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal within a mile, then swept Flora into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and protested and clung to him. When he finally set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his love and excitement into the contact. "We are going to need a bigger cabin," he said when they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning. "We are going to need a lot of things," Flora agreed. "A cradle, baby clothes, supplies. And I will need to stop tutoring when I get further along, which means we will have less income for a while." "We will figure it out," Austin promised. "We always do. Flora, you have made me the happiest man in Montana, in the entire West. I am going to be a father." They spent the evening making plans and dreaming out loud, imagining the child who would join them in the fall. Austin was already mentally redesigning the cabin, adding a third room for the baby, thinking about how to make their home safer and more comfortable for a family. The next months passed in a flurry of preparation. Austin worked harder than ever, taking every job he could find to save money for the things they would need. Flora continued tutoring as long as she was able, then switched to taking in mending work that she could do at home. James visited regularly, bringing gifts he had made in the blacksmith's forge. A small iron cradle, a set of fireplace tools sized for a child's hands to use years in the future, a lucky horseshoe to hang over the cabin door. Flora's pregnancy progressed normally, though the summer heat made her uncomfortable, and the morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon tested her patience. Austin was attentive and protective, sometimes overly so, earning gentle teasing from Flora when he refused to let her lift anything heavier than a soup pot. On a crisp September evening, as the first leaves began to turn gold in the aspens, Flora went into labor. Austin rode hard to Silver Ridge to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Sarah Connor who had delivered half the babies in the mining camps. Sarah came quickly, her satchel of supplies ready, and took over with the calm competence of long experience. Austin spent the longest night of his life pacing outside the cabin, listening to Flora's labored breathing and occasional cries of pain, feeling utterly helpless. James arrived sometime after midnight, having heard the news in town, and the two men waited together, supporting each other through the anxiety. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, when Austin finally heard a new sound, the thin, outraged wail of a newborn baby. Sarah appeared in the doorway moments later, tired but smiling. "Mr. Jamison, you have a son. A healthy, loud son who clearly has opinions about being born. Your wife is exhausted but doing well. Come and meet your boy." Austin entered the cabin on shaking legs to find Flora propped up in their bed, sweaty and pale but radiantly happy. In her arms was a small, red-faced bundle, and as Austin approached, he got his first look at his son. The baby had dark hair plastered to his tiny skull, Flora's nose, and a pair of lungs that he was using to full effect. "Hush, little one," Flora murmured, rocking the baby gently. "Come meet your papa. Austin, say hello to Thomas Andrew Jamison." Austin felt tears streaming down his face as he reached out to carefully touch his son's impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around Austin's calloused thumb with surprising strength, and Austin felt his heart expand to accommodate this vast new love. "Thomas Andrew," he repeated softly. "After your father and me. Flora, he is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this little person." Flora smiled tiredly. "Mostly I made him, but you helped a little." Austin laughed through his tears and carefully sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around his wife and new son. "Thank you," he whispered into Flora's hair. "Thank you for this gift, for our family, for everything." They sat together as the sun rose fully, the three of them united, a family in the truest sense of the word. Sarah bustled around tidying up, then discreetly left to give them privacy. James peeked in long enough to congratulate them and get a glimpse of his nephew, before heading back to town to spread the news. In the days following Thomas's birth, Austin marveled at how much one tiny person could change their lives. The cabin filled with the sounds of crying and feeding, the endless cycle of diapers and soothing and brief, precious moments of sleep. Flora took to motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else, though Austin could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she sometimes had to remind herself to eat or rest. He did everything he could to help, changing diapers with fumbling fingers until he got the hang of it, walking the floor with Thomas during the night so Flora could sleep, taking over the cooking and cleaning so she could focus on the baby. It was exhausting, but it was also joyful in ways Austin had never experienced before. When Thomas was 3 weeks old, Flora asked Austin to bring her the diary. She had not written in it since the birth, too tired and overwhelmed, but now she felt ready to record this new chapter of their story. Austin sat nearby, holding his sleeping son as Flora wrote. When she finished, she read the entry aloud to him, her voice soft in the lamplight. Thomas Andrew Jamison was born on September 15, 1884, just as the sun was preparing to rise over the mountains that shelter our home. He weighed 7 pounds and came into this world announcing his presence with all the volume his small body could muster. My husband wept when he first held our son, this strong, stoic man reduced to tears of joy by the miracle of new life. Watching Austin with Thomas, seeing the tenderness and wonder in his face, I fall in love with him all over again. We have been through so much together in the less than 2 years since we met. Courtship and marriage, grief and joy, poverty and small prosperity. We have built a home from nothing, created a life in this harsh but beautiful land. And now we have brought forth new life, a continuation of our story and the beginning of Thomas's own tale. Sometimes I think back to that day on the trail when I lost this diary, not even realizing it had fallen from the wagon seat. Austin could have ignored it, left it to be ruined or lost. But he picked it up, kept it safe, and returned it to me. In doing so, he showed me exactly the kind of man he was, someone who protects precious things, who sees value where others might see just a dusty old book. That is who he is as a husband and now as a father. Protector, partner, provider. But also dreamer, supporter, friend. I am so grateful that my diary fell that day. I am so grateful that Austin found it. Because through that small act of kindness, I found the love of my life and the future I did not even know I was searching for. Austin listened with tears in his eyes, his son sleeping peacefully in his arms, his wife looking at him with love written plainly on her face. "Flora, you make me sound much better than I am." "I write the truth as I see it," Flora replied. "That has always been my promise to this diary. The real, raw, honest version of my life. And the honest truth is that you are an extraordinary man, Austin Jamison. You saved my diary, but more than that, you saved me. You gave me hope when I had almost lost it, gave me a home when I had nothing, gave me love when I needed it most." "You gave me all those things too," Austin said softly. "Before I met you, I was just drifting, moving from job to job with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to stay, to build something permanent. You gave me a family, Flora. You gave me everything that matters." They sat together in their small cabin, their son sleeping between them, and felt the weight of gratitude for the improbable series of events that had brought them to this moment. A locked diary falling from a wagon seat, a cowboy who chose kindness over convenience, a connection that grew into love, and now a family that would shape the future of Montana Territory in their own small way. The years that followed brought their share of challenges and triumphs. Austin expanded the cabin twice, adding rooms as their family grew. Flora gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Grace in 1886 and another son named Henry in 1889. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved books as much as his mother and horses as much as his father. Austin proved to have a talent for horse breeding, and their small ranch became known throughout the territory for producing sturdy, reliable animals. Flora opened a school in Silver Ridge, finally achieving her dream of proper education for frontier children. She taught during the school year and spent summers with her growing family, writing in her diary every evening, recording the continuing story of their life together. They received letters from Mary and Alice in California, sharing news and staying connected across the miles. James married at 20 and started his own blacksmithing business, remaining close to Austin and Flora, a beloved uncle to their children. The diary that had started it all remained Flora's constant companion. The original locked volume eventually filled with entries chronicling their courtship, marriage, the birth of their children, and the building of their life together. When it was full, Austin gave Flora a new diary for Christmas, and then another, and another over the years. Each one was carefully dated and stored away, a growing archive of their family history. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin surprised Flora with a gift that made her weep with joy. A proper bookshelf for their home, built from carefully joined oak, with enough space for all her diaries and the books she had slowly collected over the years. He had carved their initials into the top shelf, along with the date they met, September 1883. "For all the stories you have written and all the ones yet to come," Austin said as Flora traced the carving with gentle fingers. "You have given me such a rich life, Flora. I wanted to give you something that honors the way you have recorded it, the way you have preserved our story for our children and grandchildren to someday read." Flora kissed him tenderly, this man who had kept her diary safe and, in doing so, had kept her safe too. "You remember the day we met? When you rode up with my diary in your hands." "I remember everything about that day," Austin replied. "How worried you looked, how relieved when I returned it, how your eyes caught the sunlight and made my heart skip a beat." "I wrote about you that night," Flora confessed. "In the diary you had just returned. I wrote that I had met a man who did the right thing without expectation of reward, and I wondered what it would be like to know such a man better. I never imagined we would build a life together, have children, create all of this." She gestured around their comfortable home, filled with the evidence of their shared life. Best diary I ever found, Austin said with a grin. Would recommend. 5 stars. Flora laughed, that bell-like sound that Austin still loved more than anything. Idiot, I love you. Love you too, Flora Jamison. Every single day. Their children grew up hearing the story of how their parents met, of the diary that fell from the wagon seat and the cowboy who kept it safe. Thomas, Grace, and Henry all developed their own passions and talents, shaped by parents who valued both education and hard work, who believed in the power of stories and the importance of doing right by others. When Thomas was 15, Flora gave him the first diary to read, the one that documented her journey west and her first meeting with Austin. She gave Grace the second diary, which covered the early years of the marriage and Grace's own birth. And when Henry came of age, he received the diary that told the story of his arrival into the family. These are yours, Flora told her children. Your history, your heritage, but more than that, they are proof that small acts of kindness can change lives. If your father had not picked up my diary on that dusty trail, if he had not chosen to protect something that belonged to a stranger, none of you would exist. Our family was built on a foundation of basic human decency, and that is what I want you to carry forward into your own lives. The children took their mother's words to heart. Thomas became a teacher like his mother, eventually taking over her school when she retired. Grace married a rancher and helped build one of the most successful cattle operations in Montana. Henry followed his father's path with horses, developing a breeding program that became famous across the Western Territories. Austin and Flora grew old together in the home they had built with their own hands. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses. They celebrated weddings and grandchildren, anniversaries and simple Tuesday evenings sitting on their porch watching the sunset. Flora continued writing in her diaries until arthritis made holding a pen too painful, at which point Austin took over the task, recording her words as she spoke them. They filled shelf after shelf with their story, a testament to a life well lived and a love that endured. On a summer evening in 1923, 40 years after Austin first picked up that fallen diary, Flora passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family. Austin held her hand as she slipped away, his heart breaking even as he felt gratitude for the decades they had shared. She was 73 years old, and she had lived a life full of purpose, passion, and love. Austin followed her 6 months later, dying in the same bed where all their children had been born, in the home they had built together. His last words were, "I found her diary, and I found my life." Thomas, now a man of 53 with children and grandchildren of his own, held his father's hand and promised to keep the family story alive. The diaries remained in the family, passed down through generations, carefully preserved as precious heirlooms. They told the story of Flora and Austin, of a chance meeting on a western trail, of a diary that fell and a cowboy who chose kindness, of love that grew from small beginnings into something vast and enduring. Thomas's children read the diaries and marveled at the romance of their grandparents' courtship. Grace's grandchildren used them as primary sources for school history projects, learning about life on the Montana frontier directly from someone who had lived it. Henry's descendants preserved the diaries in protective cases, treating them as the treasures they were. The small cabin that Austin and Flora had built was eventually expanded into a proper ranch house, but the original structure remained at its heart, a reminder of humble beginnings and the power of determination. The land they had purchased with Thomas Nichols's savings grew into a successful ranch that remained in the family for over a century. and every generation heard the story of the locked diary that fell from the wagon seat, of the cowboy who kept it safe, and of the love that blossomed when the woman came back into his life. It became a family legend, a touchstone, a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can ripple forward through time, creating legacies that endure long after the original actors have passed from the stage. The story of Austin and Flora Jamison became part of the history of Montana itself, recorded in local historical societies and genealogical records. But more than that, it lived on in the hearts of their descendants, proof that true love does exist, that partnership and respect can form the foundation of lasting commitment, and that sometimes the right person comes into your life in the most unexpected way. A diary fell, a cowboy bent to pick it up, and from that simple act of decency came a family, a legacy, and a love story that spanned generations. It was the kind of story people wanted to believe in, the kind that gave hope to those still searching for their own connection, the kind that reminded everyone who heard it that kindness matters, that small choices have big consequences, and that love, real love, is always worth the risk. In the end, that is what Flora had recorded in her diaries, not just the events of her life, but the truth that love is built day by day, choice by choice, kindness by kindness. Austin had kept her diary safe, and in doing so, he had kept her heart safe. She had given him her trust, and in doing so, she had given him a reason to become the man he was always meant to be. Their story did not have the dramatic flourishes of dime novels or the manufactured conflict of manufactured romance. It was simply the story of two people who met at the right time, recognized something valuable in each other, and chose to build a life together despite all the obstacles that frontier life placed in their path. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once, remarkable in its simplicity and profound in its impact. And it all started with a locked diary falling from a wagon seat on a dusty Montana trail, and a cowboy who decided that some things are worth protecting, even when you do not yet know their value. Austin Jamison could not have known that picking up that diary would change his life forever, but Flora knew, writing in those very pages just days after they met, that she had found something precious and rare. She had found a man worth trusting with her secrets, her dreams, and eventually her heart. And Austin had found a woman who saw past his rough exterior to the decent man beneath, who valued his character over his prospects, who believed he was capable of greatness even when he could not see it himself. Together, they had built a life that honored both of them, that created space for individual growth and shared dreams, that produced children who knew they were loved and valued. Together, they had proved that the Wild West was not just a place of violence and lawlessness, but also a place where families could flourish, where love could thrive, where ordinary people could create extraordinary legacies. The locked diary that started it all remained in the family, carefully preserved, the brass lock still functional even after more than a century. No one opened it without reverence, understanding that it contained more than just words on paper. It contained the heart of a woman who had been brave enough to write her truth, and the love story of two people who had been brave enough to build a life together in an unforgiving land. And every time someone in the family picked up that diary, feeling the weight of it in their hands, they remembered. Small kindnesses matter, love is worth the risk, and sometimes the most important thing you can do is pick up what someone else has dropped and keep it safe until they come back for it. Because you never know what that simple act might lead to, what connections might form, what stories might unfold. Austin and Flora Jamison's story was proof that the best love stories are not the ones that happen easily, but the ones that are built deliberately, day by day, choice by choice, with honesty and respect and unwavering commitment. Their love story was not perfect, but it was real. And in the end, that was worth more than all the gold in Montana's mines, all the cattle on Montana's ranges, all the stories ever written about the Wild West. It was a love story for the ages, born from a moment of simple kindness on a dusty trail, and it lived on long after the participants had passed into memory, inspiring generation after generation to believe in the power of love, the importance of kindness, and the magic that can happen when you choose to protect what is precious, even when it belongs to a stranger. The diary fell, the cowboy kept it safe, the woman came back. And from those simple events, a love story unfolded that would echo through time, reminding everyone who heard it that the best things in life often start with the smallest gestures, and that true love, when you find it, is worth holding on to with both hands and never letting go.